In this analysis, we use data visualization to analyze the change of tobacco products' popularity. The widespread use of tobacco products is known to be harmful, causing cancer, heart disease, stroke, lung disease, etc. With tobacco being so harmful, the best way to avoid the adverse effects is to avoid tobacco products entirely. We analyze data using data visualization to see how tobacco has changed over time. We can then compare these trends to the implementation of solutions such as anti-smoking campaigns in schools, online, or just in the general public. We can use this information to analyze and draw a conclusion about how effective anti-tobacco campaigns are at reducing tobacco use. That will also help make decisions about whether the government should continue funding anti-smoking campaigns. Many programs have been put into place to lower tobacco usage. Anti-tobacco programs and ideas can be found from schools to airlines to prisons. We can get a good idea if these programs work the way they were intended by visualizing the data to answer some very important questions. Such questions include, how have the proportions of people in the US smoking changed over the past couple decades? How does this number compare to the percentage of youth that have been smoking over the past couple decades? What tobacco products are people using the most compared to other tobacco products? How do different states compare in terms of tobacco use? Does education level affect tobacco use in adults? How does tobacco use trends align with the implementation of solutions for tobacco awareness? Answering these questions through data visualization will really allow us to see the effects of these programs put in place to lower tobacco use. We use a combination of sources to assemble our data visualizations. As we go through the visualizations, we will explain the source from which the data was collected. Our first graph sought to answer how different tobacco products compare in terms of popularity. Our understanding of the source is really important to us understanding what it means for us. This data was collected as a part of the National Adult Tobacco Survey, or NATS. The NATS was conducted in 2013 and was conducted over the phone. It was a survey of non-institutionalized adults aged 18 years older residing in the 50 states or in DC. The survey presented many different questions to get a more in-depth understanding of tobacco use in the United States. Questions include age, gender, education level, which tobacco product was more popular, and just general tobacco use statistics. Knowing this source is a phone survey is very important to remember because it lacks representation of those without phones in a way that something like a government consumption report would not. If we look at this first data visualization here, we get a good picture about how popular different things are. This graph is nationwide from between 2013 and 2014. As you can see, around 34% of adults use cigarettes. Around 6.8% of adults used e-cigarettes. Around 5.1% of adults use smokeless tobacco. 3.6% use cigars. 1.2% use hookahs. And only 0.6% use pipes. Keep in mind this data was collected from a survey, so it's possible for people to put down multiple products if they use multiple different tobacco products. Our second graph also shows the popularity of different tobacco products over time, but this one tells us how many units of the product people use per capita. The source of this graph is a study that the CDC did where they examined publicly available federal excise tax data from the US Department of Treasury's Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau. They did a study from 2000 to 2020 to get all this data. This answers which tobacco products were most commonly purchased and how many of each product there was per capita. If we look over the chart here, we can see that cigarettes were the runaway favorites with almost 1,400 cigarettes per capita over a long period of time, or over this entire period of time. Cigars was a distant second at around 31 cigars per capita. Loose tobacco had around 22 cigarette equivalents per capita, and smokeless tobacco was almost zero comparatively. This chart is also really cool because it shows over time. So we have a nice slider up here, and say you only wanted to know what the cigarettes per capita were from 2000 to 2005. We can just make the slider just like this, and then you can see it's 1,899 cigarettes per capita over that 5-year span. So you want to compare that to the past 5 years. You can kind of just grab this little slider, slide it right down this way. And as you can see, we have 964 cigarettes per capita. So it effectively cut in half from 2000 to 2005 to 2015 to 2020, which is a really cool design of this graph. Our third data visualization Uses the same data as the last graph, just presents information in a way where you can really see the decline or the stagnation of different tobacco products over time. As we can see, all total combustibles and cigarettes followed a very similar path as most of combustibles were cigarettes. But you can see that cigarettes had the biggest decline of anything by far. The amount of cigarettes per capita really declined over the past 20 years, whereas everything else seemed to be a little bit more niche and stayed a little bit more level, but it was a lot lower overall. These three graphs, These three graphs do a great job to give us a picture of how the popularity of tobacco products has changed over the past couple decades. We can clearly see that tobacco consumption as a whole has gone down, but cigarettes have certainly remained the most popular method of consuming tobacco. E-cigarettes have been making a rise in recent years, but they still have a ways to go to catch up with cigarettes. The rest of the tobacco industry have remained rather niche and much more consistent compared to cigarettes, which have declined the most. In relation to our question of how effective anti-smoking campaigns have been, we can reasonably conclude that they're doing a pretty good job at reducing tobacco use nationwide, based on the results from these three graphs that we have here.
For this graph, we have used two different data sources, but we combined them into one source because it was all the same data, except for one of the sources was data for years 1995 to 2010, and the other source was just data for 2011. The sources were surveys conducted by the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System, abbreviated as BRFSS, which is a part of the CDC. BRFSS is an ongoing data collection program designed to measure behavioral risk factors for the adult population. So in this graph, we have used the 4 levels of tobacco use throughout all the states in the US to measure the percentages of tobacco use among those levels. We added in filters since it is a lot of information on the screen, and scrolling just leads to more. So filters makes it easier to display the percentages wanted for specific or certain states. The other filter, which is filtering the measure names, the 4 levels of tobacco use, right up here, by different colors so that the viewer is able to distinguish what bar is what. So as we can see here, if we go and let's say we only want to see, or we want to see only Alaska, Florida, Maryland, and Montana, it would be easier for someone to be able to read this compared to seeing all of them on one screen. For this graph, we have used a youth tobacco survey. The CDC conducted this study from 1999 to 2017 to provide states with comprehensive data on both middle school and high school students regarding tobacco use. 2 cluster surveys were done with kids from grades 6 to 8 and kids from grades 9 to 12. This data gives us important information and about tobacco use in kids, as all the other sources address only adults. So in our graph here, the way we have demonstrated the percentage of youth that are smoking over the past years, we have used the average percentage of youth that smokes, splitting them into 2 different school levels, which are middle school and high school, throughout 1999 to 2017. To make the graph more understandable, we have included filters, which are over here. The school levels are distinguished by the different colors. So here we have the blue for high school and this orange color for middle school. And then we have a filter for the years from 1999 to 2017 So there's an ability to show only a certain year, or let's say 1999 to 2010 if we wanted. And it makes it easier to compare or differentiate the data between the two school levels. So let's go ahead and say if we were to do that, we can see how that changes. There is also a filter here for gender. If a viewer wanted to see how the data changed for just females or for just males. So let's say we just want female, or let's say we just want male, or female and male. For this graph, we have also used the National Adult Tobacco Survey data source. This graph demonstrates tobacco use by all the education levels that were used in the survey. The way that we have displayed this data is by adding the percentage of US population that smokes categorized by the different education levels, and they are all in different colors, which we can see here which is what. We have also added a filter in that a viewer would be able to choose different tobacco products and see how the graph changes based on that. So if we wanted to see just cigarette use, we could see that, or cigarette use and hookah use, and all of them. Labels have also been added above the bars to allow viewers to know the exact percentage of each education level that smokes, because it would be hard to know the exact percentage without the labels. And that is how we have used our different data sources to create visualizations of the data that we found to display a better understanding.